Let's begin our study. We're going to go to 2 Samuel 13:1. And we're going to read this distasteful, awful story, but there is going to be a lot of information in it for you and I would like to ask you some questions at the end as to what you learned from some of those things that we need to be watching for and what we can learn from this terrible story. 2 Samuel 13:1. All right. Verse 1. After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar, and Abner loved her. Now, the Bible writer wrote that, but there wasn't any love, let me tell you. It really bothers me that they say that. Let's talk about different kinds of love. How many of you have heard of agape love? Yeah. Anybody know what those specific things are? Agape love is the kind of love that God would have for us. It's wanting to serve. It's out of kindness. It doesn't matter how ugly or stinky or awful they are, you still have love for them. Like a child that has a messy diaper or a street person who smells, you try to give them the love of God. So you have this unselfish, altruistic love. It's the best type, and it's what God has for us. Then there's phileo love. This is like what you have for a sister or a brother. You just feel a bond because they're, in your family. Or you feel a bond because you've been rooming with them all year and you just kind of feel attached. And you would feel it naturally. And then there is another kind of love. Does anybody know what that third kind is? Eros love, which is a shortened word that has another connotation. Do you have any idea what that would be? Erotic love. It's a Greek word, and at sometimes in our life we have all experienced it. It's a physical attraction. I want that person. It's an erotic desire. I desire that person. It triggers hormones to surge. It makes you feel so serious about it, you can get really fixated. This is where you see stalkers. You see people who are obsessive, people who won't let it go, people who won't let you leave. They say they don't love you anymore, but you're trying to grab at them, and they can't leave you. It's an obsession. So it is a very, it turns rather selfish. Now, why would God give us an eros love? Well, it is a good thing when you have a strong relationship to desire someone, but there's wonderful things when you have a combination with agape love. And so it's not that you just desire them, but that you want to help them. I have a good illustration of agape love this week. I'm a loved wife. I got into my car on Thursday evening. I was working at my office, and it was dark, and you know how you get into a car and you can just feel that somebody's been there? And I was a little bit worried, and then I saw there was a card on my steering wheel. My husband wanted to celebrate Valentine's early because he was going to the youth rally that was in Chicago this weekend. And there was a little stuffed animal. And it said, I just hope that you don't mind that I took your car and got it washed. And I filled it up with gas so that you'd be ready to go to Camp Sabo. No, I don't mind that at all. And when I was taking my mom to her eye appointment yesterday, I was out of windshield wiper fluid, and I called my husband and said, I'm going to need some help. I don't really know how to do that. And he said, don't worry about it. I said, well, I know you're on your way to Chicago. He said, just don't worry about it. I got a text, and it said, your car windshield wiper fluid is filled, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Is that a nice husband? That's agape love, taking care of somebody. And it's a beloved. I mean, like, I always think about my husband. He always gets that electric blanket ready for me before I go to bed every night. I never have to ask him, is the electric blanket on? I mean, wouldn't you think he'd ask me that? But no, it's always on. So it's a great thing. God created physical attraction between man and woman. But when there's agape love, it is a better focus. It is a healthier focus, and it's not a selfish focus. So, who are we talking about? What was the name of the young man? Amnon. And he had this interest, let's not call it love, in Tamar, his sister. Now, I think you would be able to see what kind of love that he had for his sister. Because his love was based on physical attraction, in erotic desire. He wanted his own gratification, and he was obsessed with her. Yet, well, let's see how distressed he is. Verse 2. Amnon was so distressed over his, by the way, did you see that? It's his sister. Ew, right? His sister. It may have been that she'd had another mother, but they probably all had the same father. So he became so distressed over his sister that he became sick, for she was a virgin. And it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. What is that meaning? He evidently wanted to do something to her, and there was this issue because she was a virgin, and it just made him so distressed. What love are we talking about? Yeah, eros, and it was a pure eros, wasn't it? Not mixed up with some agape love. By the way, Amnon was the son of who? David. David was what? When you are the king's son, do you think you get what you want most of the time? Yes. David's son was used to getting what he wanted. And he thought, he was so obsessed that he might not be able to have sex with this woman, that he was feeling crazy. Now you all go, oh, I can't relate to that. That's great. Have you ever wanted something so bad that you could make yourself sick? Maybe you wanted popularity, or you wanted a degree, or you wanted people to know that you were wealthy, or you wanted something that other people didn't have, and you got really obsessed about it, sick, in a bad way. Well, why shouldn't Tamar do what he wants her to do, right? Because she's an individual and she has a right. Well, she was his half-sister. Remember that? Is there any taboos when we have involvement with our half-sister? This is not funny. I had a counseling situation where this couple came in, and I always start, try to be nice. You kind of do a little sandwich before you get to the meat. You start to do the nice stuff. So how did you meet? And they said, at a family reunion. I said, oh, you must be kissing cousins. And they went, yes. I had a really hard time recovering from that. I know that my smile, I'm like, well, okay, so you're here to work on your marriage. Okay. It's just, it's shocking. And marriage was forbidden between half-sisters and half-brothers. It was forbidden, by the way, by law. Punishment was death. But Amnon's mind was under the control of who? Satan. And he was practicing that eros love, and he was obsessed. And he continued to think about it. When you fantasize about something over and over and over, there are big chances that you will go for doing that to someone. And he was spoiled. He was used to getting what he was wanting. If you put him in this day and age, it would be fantasy life, pornography. It would be wanting somebody that you're forbidden to have, so there's some excitement about that. We often get a lot of feelings when something is forbidden. I often wonder, I'm a counselor, so you just see things, and I notice that when I go to the coffee shops that you see a lot of people that I believe are having affairs. How do I know that? Well, if you're going to see them at home, you're not sitting there lingering, holding their hand and telling them that you love them like they're going to be gone for a while. They just sit there holding and lingering at the door of their car, etc. And it's like when it's forbidden, it's exciting. I knew a young couple, and they'd been married for quite a while, and his wife got involved with somebody on the bike trail, and she wanted him so badly. And then she divorced her husband, who actually was her very best friend. She wanted to tell him how upset she was because she didn't desire this man anymore after she married him, because once you have all that excitement and it's no longer forbidden and you're allowed to have it, it's not as exciting anymore. It's amazing how our sinful desires can control our lives and really get us rolling. What's your fantasy? Maybe it's not a sexual one. Maybe it's just that you really want to be popular. Have you noticed how many people will give themselves up in such a way for popularity? I think about some of the reality shows. Have you seen how they dress some of the people on American Idol? I mean, they have to give up so much, and they have to conform to what it is that they want them to do. I looked at a few minutes of America's Top Model, and they had all these young girls that wanted to be models so badly. They would sacrifice anything. And they made them pose for some nude pictures. And some of the girls felt very frightened, but they wanted to win the prize, so they did it. What will you get suckered into doing because you're wanting something so bad? And is what you want what God wants you to have? You know, there's a little saying that says, did you get what you want? Do you want what you got? We need to figure out, do we really want certain things, or is it what God wants for us? We can only have a life that's happy when God is the planner of our life and our future. Some of you were raised in Sabbath school or Sunday school, and you remember this song. It's called "Oh, Be Careful." Do you remember that? Can you sing it with me? And we'll sing all 5 verses in one, right? Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear. There's a Father up above, and he's looking up, down in love. So be careful, little lips, what you say. Those are little stories, little songs. But isn't it true? And isn't it, have you ever seen that book? Everything I learned was in kindergarten. Well, guess what? They're still really true today. Wouldn't it be nice if we learned all the lessons of that song? God has promised to renew our minds, hasn't he? So if you have a fantasy life that you're really struggling with, give it to God. He really wants to help you. Amnon did not ask God for help with his problem. And that's why he continued to pursue what he was going to do. He didn't change his thinking. Wouldn't it have been nice if, this thought that he had, he was acting like Joseph, and he said, how can I sin against God? But no, he didn't do that. He continued. We really need to be careful who we get our advice from. And you know what? He didn't run to God. He ran to his cousin, whose name was Jonadab. Now, Jonadab was not well known for his good advice. He was a people pleaser. You ever said, oh, I have this problem, and you talk to somebody, and they're all about you, and it's all about you, and they think, yep, that person's bad, and you're so good. What's the problem? Mrs. White says that we should go to people who have more wisdom and who are older than us and are not our same age. And he went to Jonadab, and he was all about making him happy. Well, people pleasers tell you what they want to hear. And he was a person who wanted to make his cousin happy. So Satan is a liar and a cheat, is that right? And he was working through Jonadab. And Jonadab gave him some really interesting advice. Well, let's go to 2 Samuel 13:3. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. Now, so that's, again, his cousin. Now, Jonadab says he was a very crafty person. Does that mean he did crafts? It's important when you read the Bible that you start to look at your concordance and figure out what it means. He didn't do crafts. It says he intentionally liked to deceive people. Be watchful that you don't have friends that you're asking advice who intentionally love to deceive people. We can be concerned about people that we don't want to make them a person that we go to advice. We can be their friend, but we can't always go to them for advice. Watch out who you hang out, even with people that are here, because there are people whose hearts are unconsecrated. And don't be so concerned about somebody that you start to get romantically involved. We used to be at one church where every time somebody had a Bible study, they got romantically involved with the person they were involved with. Really good thing not to do opposite sex Bible studies. It's just something that we can really get our boundaries all messed up. And our friends can influence us to do bad things. By the way, birds of a feather, what? See, my mother always said that, and she was always right. I didn't know that it was something that other people said too, but anyway. So the crafty Jonadab helped create a wicked plan. In verse 4, Jonadab said to him, why are you, listen to this is kind of like a little sympathy. Why are you, the king's son? What does that mean? Like, after all, you're the king's son. Like, little attitude there. Becoming thinner day after day. Will you not tell me? He showed a lot of concern. You know, sometimes when people feel sorry for us, we start to feel sorry for ourselves. Have you ever done that? Yeah. I had a daughter, and she used to go, Mommy, my finger hurts. And if I'd say, well, that's okay, honey. It won't hurt in a little while, and we're just going to continue on getting ready here for school. But if I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, it's so bad. It's worse. It just is. Like, have you ever had that? Oh, it's so... When somebody feels sorry for you, we can really get feeling sorry for ourselves. And watch out, because people will use your sympathy to bond you with them. And sometimes people that you wouldn't even think you would be hanging out with, all of a sudden you're having a problem. Remember Lucifer saying to Eve in the garden, the Lord won't let you eat of this tree? Yeah, you know, we can get really upset. Yeah. And then when somebody says that, especially somebody who's involved in another relationship or whatever, and you start talking to them, you get bonded with them, and then you start thinking, they would never treat me that way, and it's like, whoo, right? That's the anatomy of an involvement with an inappropriate person. Amnon said to Jonadab, I love Tamar. Right. My brother Absalom's sister. Ooh, he knew full what he was doing. Jonadab wanted to please Amnon. He wanted to help him get what he wanted. So Jonadab came up with a deceptive and evil plan. You know, it is not hard to do that, is it? Especially when your mind is not consecrated. In verse 5, Jonadab said to him, lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. Anybody remember the big bad wolf? How are you, my little pretty? Remember? Come on over here. The wolf was acting like grandmother in the story. Yes, he was supposed to pretend he was physically ill. Do you get the feeling he wasn't physically ill? He's supposed to pretend. He's going to play on her sympathy. And he was also going to get some sympathy from his dad. You can get, the more people you get involved in your sinful plan, the more you don't have to take responsibility. It'll look like it's all their problem, right? Just like an abuser that grooms people and he starts touching them, or she starts touching them in an inappropriate way and acting like everything's okay. It's like when it really happens, then it'll act like you really enjoyed the process. And Jonadab said, continuing, when your father comes to see you, say to him, please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare the food in my sight that I may eat it from her hand. Now Amnon didn't just like Jonadab's plan. He loved it. It pleased Amnon, and he would go along with it because it was all going his way. It was, getting him to where he wanted to go. Guilt is something that was happening in David's family. Do you remember David? Just before this, he'd gotten in some trouble. Do you remember? Let me see. There was something about a bath, and there was something about a woman named Bathsheba. Do you remember that? Yeah, he got in hot water, let me tell you. And he liked women because he had a lot of women. He had concubines, everything. And he was feeling guilty. In fact, he was a little bit embarrassed, and so he was kind of laying low. When you feel guilty and you think your whole kingdom might be looking at you, you kind of lay low, including with all of his kids. David was not an involved father. And there's something about guilt. It makes you agree to all kinds of things. Show me a guilty parent, and I'll show you one that gives you a lot of toys, right? Did you know the toy industry watches the divorce rate because they know that the toys are going to go up that year? There's all kinds of things. So if you're one of those kids that had a guilty parent, you're been indulged. You need the Lord to help you because we have some issues here. And David's kids were spoiled and bratty, and they were not getting punished or disciplined, and they were getting what they wanted. Really, the root of that is selfishness, isn't it? So David was a busy king. And when Ammon calls him up, I'm putting my phone up there. Well, that's how I would think he called. I don't know, maybe I got a bugle out there. Maybe he had a trumpeter. I don't know what he had. But he calls him up and he asks his dad to come to visit him. And you know, if you're feeling guilty and bad when your kid calls you, it is so nice. They must want your advice. And he came running on over. And so in verse 6, David, who was honored to see his son, it says, then Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came over to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight that I may eat from her hand. And David he fell for it. He was impressed. Didn't that seem like a weird plan? But he didn't evaluate it. He was so happy he could help his son. If only David knew his kids well, he would have known that Amnon was a spoiled brat, and he liked what he wanted to get all the time. And he would have known the nature of his sons. He never even thought about questioning him, and he never even thought about his daughter leaving the safety of her home. Evidently, she wore some kind of gown that showed she was a virgin and a daughter of the king. And they usually kept them in homes that were safe and they were secure. And yet, David would ask his daughter, Tamar, to leave her safe quarters and come to her brother's house to live without a supervisor, without any security. He just trusted that everything would be okay. So David sent home a message to Tamar saying, go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. Now, Tamar must have thought, well, that's an odd request. And she must have thought, leaving my home to go to my brother's home? Well, but who asked her? Her dad asked her. Isn't it interesting how Satan uses family members to give us bad advice? It must have been a very odd request, but she obeyed and she went to her brother's house. So in verse 8, so Tamar went to her brother's house and he was lying down. Yeah, he took this lying down. Did you notice that? And she took the flour and she kneaded it, and she made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and placed them out before him, but he refused to eat. We can be sure, because God is a merciful God, that God was talking to Amnon, trying to get him not to do that. He was trying to get him to be, turn his path around, because he's a fair God. But Amnon wanted what he wanted, and he continued and he pursued. Amnon did not say, how can I sin against God? Because he wanted to satisfy his own evil desires. Fantasy life will lead you down that rocky road. Don't think that you can just think about something but never act on it. You ever had a bad mood and gotten crabby and said something? Yeah. Your mind will lead you to the behavior. We should do a little mind exercise. Let's just think for a minute, okay? I'm going to be, I see our time is dwindling. Well, maybe I won't do a mind exercise. You all are hungry? Where's Father Israel? Can we have about 10 more minutes, maybe? Okay, because I don't want our cooks to say that they're walking off the job. Okay. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's say that you are, right now I'd like you to think about somebody that you lost, that you really loved. Somebody that you lost, a grandparent, a friend, somebody, or maybe they were told that they had a chronic disease. Okay, now I know that men are really not into feelings, but maybe the women are, okay? So if you don't know a feeling, I'd like you to just think about that for a few seconds. And then I want you to tell me what you're feeling. Okay. How do you feel? Sad? Any other comments? Regret. Yeah, there's a little guilt maybe. Anything else? A longing to be with them. Yeah, especially people who believe they're in heaven looking down. They often want to hurt themselves and kill themselves because they want to go join their friends and their loved ones. So sad, isn't it? So that's a pretty sad feeling. What? Memories. Yeah, just brings that memory. Okay. Now I would like you to, snap out of it. Everybody has that look. Was there something that somebody said that touched your heart and they gave you a compliment, or they said that you blessed them in some way, or they said that you were really capable at something, or they really thought that you would get somewhere in the future, and you just felt really encouraged? I'd like you to think about that for a few seconds. My seconds are really short. Okay, how are you feeling? What's some feelings do you have? Affirmed. Happy. I'm happy. Capable. A man, just a minute, just a man. Go ahead. Motivated, encouraged, moving forward. Now, how many of you felt sadness a few minutes ago? How many of you feel happy, encouraged right now? Did you notice that you could change the way you thought and you could change the way you feel? How many of you think that your feelings are your guide? Well, watch out. Who impacts our feelings? And when you have a certain mind or a certain fantasy or whatever, all you need to do is change the way you're thinking and you can move in a different direction. It's very important that you know that and that we fill ourselves up with promises. So here it is, Amnon. Let's get back to our story. His first deception was get the girl to feel sorry for him. I can't tell you how many girls will go with an abuser or a man that hits them or plays mind games on them or pushes them to do things because he got her to feel sorry for him. Number 2, Amnon said to his servants, have everyone go out from me. Leave the room. Now, remember, whose son was he? When he tells his servants to go out from the room, what do? They go out, right? What was he trying to do? Isolate. That's a big thing, isolate. What is it when the lion wants to eat a sheep or whatever? Where does he go? To the one on the edge of the crowd, right? When somebody wants to make away with someone, they try to isolate them into a room. Again, my practice is in the Michigan State area, and so I get a lot of young girls that when they went to a sorority or something, they were having a great time drinking, but when they went to the bathroom, there were guys up in those bedrooms waiting to grab them in from that bathroom and take them into one of those rooms. Or that, they thought that their girlfriend's got a boyfriend that's staying overnight, and then the girlfriend doesn't get home on time, and she's there with a boyfriend, and then something terrible happens. When you isolate is when you're going to have issues. And this is what Amnon was doing. So they all went out to him. And by the way, I'm being really, really true. When you have sex, it takes some work, doesn't it? I have so many people, and they'll come in, and I'll say, so are you married? No. I'm like, but I have to now ask, do you have any children? Oh, yeah, I've got 8 children. Oh, okay. Well, they just kind of came by, and I'm like, oh, you mean you don't know how that happened? Oh, no, but you know how things go. It just happens. I'm like, did you, have to get a loan? Well, yeah. Did you have to take your clothes off? Well, yeah. I'm like, okay. Did you have to get into some kind of a position of some kind and then have to have it? Well, yeah. I'm like, so you knew what you were doing, right? Okay, let's just not go by that anymore. You have to recognize that there's a plan, isn't there? God is able and capable. So in verse 10, Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the bedroom. Wow, not the living room or the kitchen, right? That I may eat from your hand. Isn't that special? I want to eat from your hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them to Amnon, her brother, in the bedroom. Tamar didn't have any fear because Amnon was who? Her brother. Watch out. The devil will use people that are close to you or that you think you can trust. She thought she could, try and be safe with her own brother. In fact, went to a sexual abuse seminar. 90% of the molesters of young children are their own family members. Fathers, stepfathers, even mothers. Mothers especially on drugs that will sell them. But a huge thing is cousins. It's really sad. They tell them sexual jokes, just like Israel was talking last night about how somebody a little older will show you certain things or pictures to try and see if they can get you kind of involved, and then they can say, well, you enjoyed it, and that was a part of what you wanted to do. So in 14, verse 1, now when she had brought the cakes to him to eat, he took hold of her, and he said to her, come lie with me, my sister. Now, what was he doing with his hand? He grabbed her, and he asked this little invitation, come lie. Like, did she have a choice? Did you notice that? He's acting like, don't you want to participate with my little dirty plan? He has her by the hand. He's older, he's stronger, and guess what? He isn't sick. Have you noticed? He's strong, right? Which brings us to another thing, and that is that abuse or rape often happens when somebody is physically stronger, bigger, older, etc. Verse 12, she begged him not to hurt her. She answered to him, no, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing. She was trying to bid to his better thing. Take the higher road, don't do this. But Amnon was determined to have his own way. And he didn't care about the consequences. He couldn't be reasoned with. Nobody could say, this is not what God wants. He didn't care. Have you ever done a sin and thought, I'll just ask for forgiveness afterwards? I'm just going to do this. I'm not going to think about it or whatever. He wanted to do what he wanted. He couldn't be reasoned with, and it didn't matter that the virtue of his sister was being threatened. And David held his children to few rules. And when you have no accountability in a family, you have a lot of dysfunction. And when there's a lot of dysfunction, it's like cancer. It spreads through the whole family. Actually, I'm just worried about our time. So I'm okay, Israel? I'm really not going to be in probation's not closing or anything? You're good. Okay. Before I tell you, I wanted to tell you about a survey. This is like more disgusting than I can imagine. This is because we have a pornography attitude. They asked kids 14 to 18, is it acceptable for a boy or a young man to force a girl or a young woman to do something sexual to him? What would you say? Of course not. You know what the teens said? The majority, 84%, said, well, it is okay for a boy to force a girl to do something sexual to him if she arouses him. Oh, watch out. Like, that's how men are wired. Okay, if she leads him on, if they have dated for a long time, oh, we've been dating for 6 months, now I'm just going to have my way with you. Isn't that amazing? Or if she says that she was willing to have sex, but then she changes her mind. That's a pornography attitude, and it's really sad. And that's why we have a culture that is having a lot of problems. That's why some of the famous movies out there are shades of gray. Amnon was foolish and headstrong, and not only was Amnon selfish, Mrs. White says that he was a drunk. Isn't that an interesting point? How many crimes are created because somebody is under the substances? Does that excuse them from the crime? No. And we know that that is becoming a huge issue. There's also that narcissistic behavior, which is, I will do what I want to do, and I don't care who I have to stand on to do it. We have kind of a narcissistic culture. Watch out for people who keep pushing you to do things you don't want to do and act like it's because they love you or because they care about you. Just watch out. And when we are Christians, shouldn't we be thankful that what God wants for us is more important than anybody else because he's got altruistic, agape love towards us. Verse 14, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than her, he forced her and he laid with her. He isolated her. He pushed her around. And then, this is interesting, because so many times people say, oh, if I have sex, I'll hold this relationship. I'll make this relationship stronger. They'll be more bonded to me. Girls will say, he'll be bonded to me. He won't be looking anywhere else because he's getting it from me. And guys will continue to say, if you love me. Haven't you heard that, girls? If you love me, you'll do this, right? Okay. Well, this is interesting. A lot of the movies portray that it's okay these days, and it is just a part of a relationship. But God is not honored because his precious children are going against their conscience. And instead of submitting to him, you're submitting to another person, and it changes the relationship with him. Movies are all about all kinds of things, and there's a school of thought out there that domination of females is a healthy thing, or that you're a real man the more children that you have. It's going on in a lot of countries, including our own. There are certain religions that agree with these, like little girls are being married off to older men. We've all heard about the ISIS crisis, Boko Haram, that their role is to be a baby maker. There's no sweet whisperings of love or romance. It's just that they're a baby factory. I mean, there's even countries where women's private parts are cut off so that there would be no enjoyment for her. And the good news is that Christianity is liberating to women. Christianity demands respect and commitment. Women's bodies were formed for pleasure, and it's wonderful when it's a loving, warm relationship. But you would hear in many other religions and in our society that women should have no voice when it comes to their sexuality. Who loved women when they were on this earth and spent a lot of time with them? Jesus, didn't he? He restored them. After Tamar was raped, verse 15 said that Amnon hated her exceedingly, which means that even if you get what you want, doesn't mean that it bonded you. There's a lot of girls that go, oh, I don't know, I gave him what he wanted, and then I never heard from him again. I'm like, really? It's kind of how it is. Get what you want, and you no longer have an interest. You really have to have all the other parts, the relationship, the spirituality, the recreation. You need to have all the understanding of personalities for it to be a wonderful thing. But Amnon's animal lusts were gratified. He was really into arrows. And then he just throws her out on the porch. Very sad. Tamar was hurt physically and emotionally. Amnon got what he wanted, and he was done. And he threw her out on the porch. And it was a really awful thing. He wanted to humiliate her. Her life was changed forever. Her dad's decision not to figure out more about the plan and to put her into that household changed her future, because in that area, if you weren't a virgin, you would not get married. She did not have a future. Her brother Absalom was the one who must have known about his brother's character, because he said as soon as he saw her, did Amnon do something to you? And he asked her to come to his house. He didn't do anything, but he was seething. I bet that they thought that he was happy and he was doing okay, but you ever had somebody who has this calm, normal face, but inside they're boiling? He was boiling, and it spilled over because you know what he went on to do? He took his father's concubines, which are the women that he had, and raped many of them, and then he went and killed Amnon when he had an opportunity. He also tried to unseat his father from the king's seat. You know, there's something about it when a father was told and didn't act on it and didn't do anything to help. It also showed that maybe David wasn't as happy with maybe he was a little sexist. He wanted to make his sons happy, but not his daughters. And the rape really changed a lot of people. David didn't do anything, and he didn't keep anyone accountable, and Absalom went on to hurt his brother. Change the future, everybody. Don't act on your fantasies. Work on where you need to be. Plan for your children. You know that children are very deserted by their fathers in this society. It's because fathers are having sex, but they weren't really planning the birth of a child, and they're irritated. But actually, they found out in some studies that fathers that are home with their kids but are ignoring them because of games or internet have more rebellious kids than the ones who have no father and idealize in their minds what they think a father should do. And so it was a very sad story. Secrets are very harmful, and everybody in the end hurt. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We can trust that God will help us when it comes to things like that. What type of love do you want to keep developing in your life? Agape love. When we think only of our own needs, what is the root of that problem? Selfishness and evil. When can we get emotionally sick when we want something so bad and we're driven? Is it always a good thing? Isn't there a commandment in the Bible that goes along with that? Covetousness. Is it ever acceptable for a man to force a girl to do something sexual? I hope you heard that really loud and clear. No, no, no. If perpetrators are under the influence of substance abuse, does that excuse them from the criminal act? No. And painful secrets, we need to let people know. We need to try and get help. We need to keep people accountable so it won't happen to other people. And one thing that I know is that no matter what's happened or whatever we struggle with or whatever has happened to us, that God is the ultimate healer, and He will lead us through that pain if we'll hold His hand. So though these stories were written thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, you know what? You can learn a lot from them today in 2016, can't you? I hope you're studying the stories of the Bible, because the stories that God wants to have you hear and wants you to think about are for such a time as this. And I hope that you will allow God to guide you and learn as you study more about Him, so that you will have the lessons that you need to live your life in the best way possible.